Hi, hello and welcome. This is going to be a really flattering video, as you can see. I don't know why I chose this angle. I just don't want you to look at my orange couch. It's also a mess right now. If you're new here, today is Friday. You could have known that by looking at the calendar. But on this channel, Friday means last meals day, where I sit down, I eat a last meal, and I tell you a story of the person who was eating that meal. It's quite simple, really. Today's story is super sad though. I have researched it for 2 days and both days I broke down in tears just because it's one of those miscarriage of justice cases, and also one of those cases that kind of proves to you why I'm not really pro death penalty, just because of cases like this. So yeah, just a disclaimer if I break down here, expect it, please. Yeah, let's dive into this sad, depressing case that's gonna ruin your Friday. Shan't we? Won't we? Let's do it. While this ice cream defrosts here. So as always, let me explain. Joe Arridy didn't actually specify the flavor of the ice cream for his last meal. It will become apparent why not. And it's also a sad piece of information. So I just chose my own flavor and he ate it out of the bowl, hence why the bowl. So somewhere through this video I'm just gonna, put some ice cream into this bowl once it defrosts, because my freezer freezes shit, like, to the next level. So as always, what can we tell about the person just judging by the meal that they have had? Well, here, if I tell you that straight up from the beginning of the video, it would spoil most of this case. So let's dive in, let's start from the beginning. And then that will become apparent. So Joe Arridy was born in 1915 in Pueblo, Colorado. In Pueblo, Colorado. He was born to Syrian parents, Henry and Mary, so they emigrated to Syria for the search for a better life. His dad was at that time working for this iron company, and Joey was their firstborn. So everything was going okay until Joey was of the age where he should have started speaking, he should have started showing, certain abilities, and with time it became apparent that he was kind of behind. So they brought him to the doctor and they said, yeah, this child will have some mental conditions, some mental health conditions. Then once his parents sent him to school, after his 2nd grade, his teachers actually told him that he should go back and be homeschooled just because he was that behind other children. It was distracting in class, he wouldn't actually get the benefits, he wasn't actually learning anything. By this time, the family actually had 2 other children, so Joey had his brother and his sister. And now they weren't financially well off anyways, but this is when his dad started bootlegging as well. So his dad is struggling at this time and his mom can't actually really keep up with Joey. So Joey is sadly left to just wander the streets and just bring himself up. During this time also, especially because for the age, so 1920s, his dad kind of expected for his oldest son to be able to help him provide for the family, which Joey in this case couldn't do. So his dad was seeking advice from the neighbors, and the neighbors were like, yeah, you should commit him, meaning you should put him into the mental health institution. So his father does, and he puts him into what was practically an insane asylum. Yeah, I'll start soon. It's still fucking frozen, okay? My freezer is a bitch. Okay, look at those colors though. Look at those colors. Oh, it smells so good as well. Yeah, I'll need a distraction soon because this is gonna turn real sad real quick. So at this insane asylum they tested Joey and they realized his IQ was only 46, which would put him at the age of a 6-year-old. So he stays at this asylum, he's totally fine there. They describe him as a follower or somebody really eager to please, which will become relevant once you realize what this case is all about. But 9 months after, into his stay into this asylum, his dad realizes he is missing him and he just signed him out of it and brought him back home. But now again, Joey back home isn't supervised enough. His mom is caring for the younger children and his dad is trying to bring money to the family, so none of them is paying attention to Joey. So Joey still keeps just wandering the streets. He is literally just walking around the city, not causing any trouble. So in 1929, Joey was 14, only 14, when he was stopped on the street by this group of African American kids, and this group of boys made him perform some sexual acts on him. And luckily there was a probation officer passing by as this was happening, and they realized that these boys are sodomizing Joey. So this probation officer wrote up a letter and asked him to be committed to this insane asylum again. He wrote a letter to the Justice System Department as well, but there's nothing that came out of it. Like, as in, I couldn't find any information on these boys that were the actual perpetrators. But somehow Joey was committed back to the insane asylum. And not just that, but now he was committed to the sexual deviance unit, where the staff would actually be on them constantly, just monitoring that they're not doing any perverse activity, which in this case included masturbation as well. And it was reported that during his stay there, Joey didn't perform any of this, but just immediate miscarriage of justice. Like, why was he in the insane asylum, back to the insane asylum, while these perpetrators are loose on the streets? This is when this case starts to really piss me off and really make my blood boil. So let's just pour this ice cream in, shall we? Yeah. Professionally doing this. Ouch. Yeah, very professionally. Lols. Lols. Okay, this is great. This is already going to be great. I'm doing great. You're doing great, honey. Okay. Okay, let me clean this mess up. I'll be back. Yeah, I'll be right back. But yeah, that quickly turned into the least pleasant content to watch. Yeah, it just tells you everything about my cooking skills, doesn't it, as well? How did it go from the most frozen ice cream ever to just like the mush? Let me shut up and tell you about the case. So Joy is back in the same insane asylum, probably the only insane asylum in town, to be honest. He actually stays there until he's 21, so he's like back and forth. His parents sometimes take him home, but then he is immediately committed back. Now this asylum had like railroad. Now this asylum had like railroad tracks right next to it. Did I pronounce it right? Probably not. I'm an immigrant, okay? Forgive me, yeah? I'm forgiven for these things. Poor little bitch. So usually the patients would break out of the asylum and then they would just catch a train and go wherever. So Joey does escape with a group of patients from the insane asylum when he was only 21, so in 1936. He doesn't make it far. He basically takes the train to Cheyenne, Wyoming. And here he finds like a family, Gibson family. They had like a food truck kind of situation business, so Joey is basically just asking for work. And they accept him for work, but he only worked, I think, like 6 days with them and stayed there to be compensated before they had to move. Like, it's a food truck, they're going places. And they couldn't actually bring Joey along because he was never like an official employee. So the Gibson family drops Joey off to the railroads, but soon after he keeps wandering, he gets arrested. And now this is when it becomes truly sad. So a week before he left and took the train, there was a murder in town. It was reported that 1 or 2 assailants broke into the house of Mrs. McMurtry and her aunt, who was 58, in Pueblo. About a couple of days after that, on August 15th, there was another very similar attack. So while the parents were away for this charity event, again 1 or 2 assailants, they weren't sure at the time, entered the house where Dorothy Drain was sleeping. Dorothy Drain was attacked with her sister Barbara. Dorothy was 15 and Barbara was only 12. So the assailant attacked both of them, then went to rape Dorothy and killed her with a blow of hatchet to the head. Barbara survived, but she was in coma at the time. So here the police now made a connection that these crimes have been related. Also, there have been 2 witnesses, 2 girls that have also been assaulted, that reported a Mexican-looking man coming out of the house. And although Joey wasn't Mexican or wasn't Syrian, he kind of did Like, you could have thought that he was just from his looks. It was super easy to convict him. He was from the area. Boom, 1 point check. Second point, he was committed in the asylum for perverse behavior, even though he was a fucking victim. And well, third point, just for the kicks, it was his looks. We're gonna need more ice cream because the rest of the story is fucking depressing. Okay, so also this is soup by now. You say it even though ice cream, man. This is a soup. This is a soup. Let's be generous, right? It's 10 in the morning. Let's be generous with our fucking ice cream intake for the day. Stop judging. I can see you judging me, okay? Joe is arrested. They have questioned him. Apparently, according to George Carroll, let me tell you the name, let me name shame, because everybody deserves to be name shamed in this story. According to him, Joey confessed to him. If you remember, Joey had the IQ of 46. Joey was not able to differentiate between this tray and this ice cream. But yeah, sure, Joey confessed to the murder of the girls, said the names and everything. So this detective, Sheriff George Carroll, makes the call to the police chief, to the Pueblo police station, and he realizes that they have a man in custody who is actually Mexican. His name is Frank Aguilar. But he now is like, what if the two of them have done this together? Even better than we have two men in prison instead of one, regardless of the one of them being innocent. So now, of course, Sheriff needs to feed this information to Joey, who is very easily convinced, very easily says yes to everything, because his mental capacity is at the one of the 6-year-old child. So according to the sheriff, Joey said that he was with a man named Frank, that he did kill Dorothy Drain. But Frank's story aside, Frank was actually convicted of these murders because he was working with the dad of the family. And as you remember, Barbara survived, so she has recognized him as the attacker. So he was convicted, righteously so, and he actually got death penalty as well, and was executed in 1937. The sheriff didn't even just stop there. They brought this guy, they brought Joey to the house, to the place of the murder. Like, he's technically a child. He's just going to be traumatized. And apparently here he reenacted it perfectly. He said that he said he used a club, but then changed the story that he used an axe. So sorry, how was that never questioned? Like, why was that never questioned further? Apparently he reenacted how he has done it, and then they bring him into the station for him to confront Frank. And Frank says, like, Frank looks at him. Frank had one look at him, he was like, I've never seen the guy. But the police is like, no, he knows who you are. He just reenacted a crime, Frank, but just, admit that, yeah, that it was him. So Frank was like, I'm gonna die anyways. Yeah, I had an accomplice, let's just not say that I was the monster here. So Frank immediately kind of saw, like, because he was smart and very disturbed cookie, that he doesn't want to be connected with the sex part of this crime, and well, probably the police fed him the information that Joey was the sexual deviant here. So Frank goes ahead to say that him and Joey were basically like observing the house, waiting for the parents to leave, and then they attacked the girls. That Frank was the one to hit Dorothy with a hatchet, but then that Joey was the rapist. So of course that worked for him perfectly, and then it worked for the police because they finally had enough evidence to convict Joey. Now the case goes to trial, and his defense lawyers just say that he's not in the state to know the right from wrong. He's definitely not in the state to have committed this murder. And at the time, the term for his state was imbecile, so they classified him as dead, which could have been considered like an insanity defense, but in this case it was like, yeah, he had a condition and his IQ was really low. He couldn't have done it. There was no physical evidence against him. Barbara never actually was the witness in his case, but it was solely based on his confession and Frank's story. As we know, studies since have also shown that people who don't have the mental capacity are also more prone to give false confessions. Not to mention that they didn't have a shred of evidence against him. Well, let me correct myself. Well, I think this was dismissed in the end, but still, his conviction was mostly based on Frank's confession and his own confession, so they couldn't dismiss those, even though, there were no cameras then, they just based it off the word of the sheriff who wanted everybody convicted. But the evidence bit, so basically, They kind of shredded apart the fact that there was no hair evidence on the scene until Joey was given the opportunity to go and reenact the crime, and then suddenly, oh, there was like a thread of hair on the scene. Well, yeah, he was just there. The saddest part was when Joey was brought to the stand himself. Do you know what an oath is? Joey answered no. Who is Franklin Roosevelt? Joey, no answer. Do you know what a hearing is about? Joey, no. Bernard, can you write? Joey, sure. Can you write anything besides your name? Joey, no. Attorney Ireland also said Arridy couldn't even understand what execution meant. Believe me if I say that if he is guessed, it will take a long time for the state of Colorado to live down this grace. Ireland argued to the Colorado State Supreme Court. So, let me cry a bit while eating my ice cream. The jury takes only 3.5 hours to make a decision, and we know this is going to be a guilty verdict. And it was reported that Joey actually didn't even react to this because he didn't understand what is happening. So he has been brought in prison, and he has been named the happiest inmate on death row. You're literally witnessing my fucking period state. It's great, totally not TMI. So he was named the happiest inmate on the row because he used to play with his toy train, and actually everybody loved him. So like the inmates and the sheriff would actually bring him different train toys to play with. The other inmates would play with him and just like cause train diversions, cause train accidents as well to make him laugh. And when they asked him what he wants for his last meal, he didn't even understand the concept, so he didn't know. So they were like, okay, Joey, what do you want to eat? And he just said lots and lots of ice cream. This boy, my whole fucking face is wet. Okay. We'll get through this. There's a positive point at the end of it, I think, somehow. So on his very last day, he has eaten his ice cream off the bowl. And his mom and sister were there to say goodbye, and there are pictures of him hugging his mom. He of course again did not understand what is happening, and that is the last time that he's going to see his mom and hug her. He didn't understand the concept of the gas chamber at all. So this was on January the 6th, 1939, and one of those wardens asked him to give him like the train while he goes into the gas chamber. His last words were, no, Joey won't die. And it was reported that even in the gas chamber he was smiling. So, now that that's done, all that is over, the justice, even if it's, some form of justice, won't happen for the next 72 years, until 2007. Well, in the meantime, Roy Best, who was the warden at that prison, has been convicted in 1952 finally because of his brutal treatment of prisoners. He was convicted because he was whipping prisoners. And the sheriff, remember George Farrell, the sheriff that basically forced him, fed him words for a confession. Well, he got his last headline in 1961 when he died at a care home. So in 1992, so like with the rise of internet, people were actually looking into these different miscarriages of justices. There was this advocate for miscarriages of justices, Pershke, who was contacted by this poet who wrote this poem on Joe Arridy's case. The warden wept before the lethal beans were dropped that night in the airless room. This is a soup by now. So in 1995, Robert Pershke actually published a book called Deadly Innocence that was evaluating these kind of stories, so where people with disabilities were coerced to make false confessions. And now all of the friends of Joe Arridy who have created a website with the same name, and this attorney Martinez joined Robert Pershke to write up a 400 pages letter to the governor at the time, Ritter. So they have wrote a petition for this guy to clear Joey's name. And finally in 2007, stop losing it. And finally in 2007, Joey's name has been posthumously cleared, and the governor said it is in the interest of justice and simple decency to restore his good name. So this is when the friends of Joey Arridy have added the epitaph to the tombstone reading, "Here lies an innocent man." We have gone through it. This case gets to me like no other. I just don't understand the miscarriages of justice. Like, I don't get how it takes 72 years to clear somebody's name posthumously, when clearly there was nothing for him to be convicted in the first place. But yeah, thanks for doing this roller coaster with me. You see what happens when you don't comment and give me suggestions. I chose the saddest case in the history and I was like, well, I have cried enough during research, I won't cry on camera. No? Incorrect. Incorrect. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for joining me while I ate this soup of ice cream and told you this sad story. Drop in the comments what you want me to cover next time. Please make it something happy and hilarious so we can all laugh and forget the fact that I cried on camera for a case. But yeah, what do you think about this case? Do you know any other miscarriages? Or you mean, if you want me to continue to cry on the camera? Yeah, sure as hell, drop other miscarriages of justice. This segment exists for all of these death row cases. But yeah, I have nothing else to tell you and nothing else to say, so I guess this is goodbye. Move on with your Friday. Move on. Happy thoughts, okay? Bye!